Now, how do you think the president was reelected? I mean, where did his majority come from? Who was this majority of Americans that would renew the national optimism? Turns out Obama's reelection didn't do that. That's not the case. According to this new poll by LBD-TIPP, the Bellwether Economic Index plunged by 10% for the month of November. I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise with all of these companies planning massive layoffs, as I pointed out earlier in the monologue. Now, joining me to discuss the state of optimism in America is Steve Malanga from the Manhattan Institute and Adam Brandon from FreedomWorks. I'm going to start with you because you wrote a book in 2005 called The New Left. And I just touched on this Obama coalition and how he was elected and reelected. Is this new coalition born out of the new left of the 1960s?
Well, in a strange way, it is. First of all, I call the new coalition the big government coalition because no matter what, they always benefit from bigger government and therefore always lobby for bigger government. It was kind of born out of the 60s in this respect. When the Johnson administration created the war on poverty, what they did was they said, we're going to send all this money to cities to eradicate poverty in America. But they didn't quite know how to do it. So they sent the money to a lot of community groups, social activist groups. They created a lot of these groups by the very fact that they put this money together. And what happened is immediately these groups figured out that whatever else, they had to keep lobbying for bigger and bigger government to keep themselves in existence. This group really became the community activists. And even in 2005, when I wrote this book, and I wrote it because I saw the growing power of this coalition, I could have never predicted that by 2008, we'd have a community activist in the White House. So it happened even faster than I thought it was going to happen.
You know, Adam, the government grew its biggest from Woodrow Wilson forward. You know, before Woodrow Wilson, there was no orchestrated war on poverty. Isn't it obvious at this point that the bigger the government gets, the more poverty you get along with it?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I was before I came down here, we were talking about the hurricane that hit, and we were talking about the Chicago fire that happened back in 1860, whatever. And Chicago sprang back pretty quickly. And sometimes I wonder if you hear about all this government growth that you're mentioning since Wilson, I mean, are we much more of a resilient country even after all of this government growth? I don't know.
Well, the thing is, we've had a war on poverty since 1964.
Yes.
We still have poverty.
We lost it, yes.
What is it, 15 trillion when you think about the adjusted dollars? And they're saying that, and this is what progressives give as an answer for everything. If the schools are failing, they're always underfunded. Right. But they never tell you how much funding they need.
Right. Well, that's actually, and I learned this as a journalist, and really my sort of, issue with this goes back 20 years. Because as a journalist covering this, I constantly heard these groups, social advocacy groups, putting together new studies saying, we're failing, we need more money. We're failing, we need more money.
That makes sense.
Right.
We're not getting it done. Give us more.
After a while, I started saying to myself, well, at one point, don't we say to these people, if you're failing, maybe we should do something else. We've never done that. And that's been part of the problem. And it continues to be part of the problem that essentially, as Charles Murray pointed out in his book about this, if you just took all this money and gave it to poor people, they would no longer be poor. But all these social activists would be essentially out of an industry, out of jobs. And that's why we essentially it's really a jobs program for them. It's not really an anti-poverty program.
You know, I learned a lot years ago when I was working with a state rep in Ohio, and this state rep was sitting across a table, and there was a teachers union representative there, and this state rep pushed a piece of paper and a pen across the table and said, if you tell me how much it's going to cost to educate a student, I will double it. And there was just silence because they didn't have an answer. The answer they had was
more funding.
Not enough.
It's always more funding.